I never imagined that at 70 years old I would find myself trying to become invisible, shrinking into the shadows to avoid the very people I called my family. The day I buried Arthur, my husband of 45 years, was not only the day my world lost its anchor, but the day I discovered just how little I was valued by those who should have cherished me most. It began at his funeral, with a conversation I was never meant to hear. The service itself had been beautiful, if you can apply such a word to an event so thoroughly steeped in sorrow. St. Jude's Chapel was filled to capacity, a testament to the man Arthur had been. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the solemn faces of our friends, his former colleagues, and our family in strokes of deep blue and crimson. Arthur was a man who had been deeply and genuinely respected in our community, a kind, thoughtful soul who had dedicated his career to shaping young minds as a high school principal. He had touched so many lives, and the sheer number of people who came to honor him was a powerful, heartbreaking reminder of the void he had left behind. I had managed to hold myself together throughout the entire ceremony, a fragile statue of quiet dignity. I accepted the endless stream of condolences, the gentle handshakes, and the soft-spoken words of sympathy. My hand was clutched tightly in the hand of our son Daniel. He had been so attentive all day, a steady presence by my side, making sure I ate a small breakfast, guiding me gently through the murmuring crowd, his arm a constant, reassuring weight around my shoulders. His wife, Victoria, was there too, of course. She was the picture of elegance in a tailored black dress, her expression perfectly and appropriately solemn. She offered me a pristine handkerchief from her purse, her touch light and fleeting on my arm. After 2 hours of murmured apologies and sorrowful embraces, the weight of my grief began to feel like a physical pressure, a heavy cloak threatening to suffocate me. I could barely breathe. I desperately needed a moment to myself, a brief escape from the crushing sympathy of the crowd. The funeral home had a small, private side room, a quiet place set aside for families to gather their thoughts. By now everyone had moved on to the reception area, their voices a low hum from down the hall. I slipped away without a word to anyone, my feet moving silently over the plush carpet, driven by a desperate need for just 5 minutes of silence. I found an armchair tucked away in a corner of the empty room and sank into it, the soft velvet absorbing my weariness. I closed my eyes, and finally I allowed the tears to flow. They came in a hot, silent rush, a torrent of grief I had held back for hours. Arthur was gone, my partner in life, my most trusted confidant, my anchor in every storm. 45 years we had built a life together, and now, in the space of a single heartbeat, I was utterly alone. The finality of it was a crushing blow, and I wept for him, for us, for the future I now had to face on my own. I do not know how long I sat there, lost in my sorrow, before the soft click of the door opening startled me back to the present. I quickly, frantically, wiped at my wet cheeks with the back of my hand, not wanting anyone to find me in such a raw and vulnerable state. But the newcomers didn't notice me in my shadowed corner, partially hidden from view by a large, funereal arrangement of white lilies. "I told you we should have brought this up with him before he died." Victoria's voice was sharp, completely stripped of the sympathetic, velvety tone she had maintained all day. The change was so jarring, it was like a slap in the face. "It wasn't the right time, Victoria," Daniel replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. He was suffering enough as it was. I froze in my chair, every muscle in my body tensing. I did not mean to eavesdrop, but their sudden presence and the shocking shift in Victoria's tone had trapped me. I felt a sudden paralyzing inability to clear my throat and announce that I was there. "Well, now we have to deal with her," Victoria continued, her voice laced with an irritation so profound it was chilling. "You need to call the lawyer first thing on Monday morning. We need to know exactly what we're getting, and how quickly we can get it." "Victoria, please," Daniel pleaded, his voice strained. "My father isn't even in the ground yet. And your mother isn't getting any younger," she retorted, her words like ice picks. "The longer we wait, the more complicated and messy this is all going to get." There was a soft rustle of expensive fabric, Victoria, likely adjusting her dress as she spoke. Then she said something that made the blood freeze in my veins. Her voice dropped, but the words carried clearly across the quiet room. "Hurry up with the inheritance. I'm sending the old woman to a nursing home. The old woman. Me. A heavy sigh escaped Daniel's lips. A sound of pure, weary resignation. She's not going to want to leave the house, Victoria. Of course not. She scoffed. The sound sharp and dismissive. But she can't manage it alone, and you know it. The place is far too big for one person. There are all those stairs, the yard work, and she's already getting forgetful. It is the most sensible solution. Maybe she could come live with us, Daniel suggested, though his tone was uncertain, already predicting the answer. Victoria's laugh was not a sound of humor. It was cold and brittle, like ice shattering on pavement. In our house? Daniel, be serious. With my schedule. And besides, you know how she is. Always in everyone's business. I can't have her there, judging everything I do, every decision I make. She's my mother, Victoria. The words were a quiet rebuke, tinged with a pain that twisted my heart. And you are my husband, she countered immediately, her voice like steel. This is about our life now, Daniel. Our future. The money from selling that house could make a real substantial difference for us. Think about it. A nest egg. The kids' college funds completely secure. A short, pointed pause hung in the air. I sat perfectly still, my breathing shallow, each inhale a careful, silent effort. Arthur had been gone for less than a week. We had not even sat for the reading of the will, and here they were, carving up our life, our home, making decisions about my future as if I were a piece of furniture to be moved or discarded, as if my own wishes were a complete irrelevance. We will talk about this later, Daniel said, his voice firm, a hint of his father's authority finally surfacing. Today is about respecting my father. Fine, Victoria conceded, though not without a final parting shot. But do not put this off for too long. The real estate market is hot right now. We wouldn't want to miss our window. They left, the door closing with a soft final click behind them. For a long time I remained frozen in place, their words echoing in the silent room, branding themselves into my mind. The old woman, the house, the nursing home. It was a verdict delivered in my absence, a future I had no say in. When I finally gathered the strength to stand, my legs trembled beneath me, weak and unreliable. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a large gilt-edged mirror on the wall. I saw a pale, aged woman, her face etched with grief, her eyes wide with shock, diminished. Was this truly how they saw me? Not as a mother or a grandmother, but as a burden to be managed, an obstacle standing in the way of their inheritance. As I stumbled back toward the reception hall, forcing my legs to carry me, one single thought kept repeating itself, a desperate lifeline in a sea of betrayal. Arthur had said something to me, just days before he passed away. We had been in his room, the late afternoon sun, casting long shadows on the floor. We were discussing finances, a topic that felt to both mundane and monumentally important. He had squeezed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong, despite his weakness, his eyes serious and clear. "Ullen," he had said, his voice a low whisper, "I have taken care of everything. Do not worry about the future. I have made sure you will be protected." At the time, I had assumed he was just trying to comfort me, to ease my fears about being alone. But now, his words took on a new, urgent significance. Now I had to wonder if he had somehow known. Had he anticipated this? Had he seen this cold, calculating side of Victoria, a side I was only just now discovering? The house felt profoundly different when I returned from the funeral. It was more than just empty. It was hollowed out as if its very soul had been ripped away along with Arthur. The air was colder, the silence heavier. We had lived in this modest two-story colonial on Oakwood Drive for nearly 30 years. We had raised Daniel in these rooms. We had celebrated countless holidays, weathered illnesses, and navigated the quiet storms of a long marriage within these walls. Now every familiar corner seemed to echo with his absence, mocking me with memories. I wandered from room to room that evening, a ghost in my own home. I trailed my fingers over Arthur's things, each object a painful reminder of his presence. The reading glasses he had left on his nightstand, sitting right next to his favorite book. The worn cardigan still hanging on the brass hook by the back door, waiting for him to slip it on for a walk in the garden. The half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table, his elegant, slanted handwriting filling some of the square. They were such small, ordinary pieces of a life that had been so suddenly and cruelly interrupted. I could not bring myself to move a single one of them. To do so would feel like another betrayal, another acceptance of the unacceptable truth that he was never coming back. Sleep offered no escape that night. My mind was a relentless theater, replaying Victoria's words on a loop. Hurry up with the inheritance. I'm sending the old woman to a nursing home. The clinical coldness of it was what hurt the most. I had spent my entire adult life as a kindergarten teacher, a nurturer of other people's children. I had raised my own son with every ounce of love and patience I could possibly muster. Had it all come to this? To be unceremoniously discarded the moment I was deemed no longer useful, to have my worth measured only by the value of the property I occupied. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the foundation of my life cracking beneath me. The following morning brought a knock at my door. So cheerful and bright it felt like a violation. I opened it to find Victoria standing on my porch, a bright artificial smile plastered on her face. In her hands, she held a large casserole dish. "Evelyn, I brought you some chicken pot pie. I know how terribly hard it can be to cook for just one person." For a moment, I could only stare at her. Did she have any idea what I had overheard? Or was she always this transparently false, and I was only now, after Arthur's death, truly seeing it for the first time? I forced a thin, brittle smile and invited her in, my own voice sounding foreign and distant to my ears. "Thank you, Victoria. That is very thoughtful of you." She swept into my kitchen as if she owned the place, setting the heavy dish down on my counter with a decisive thud. Without so much as a moment's hesitation, she began opening my cabinets. "Let me just help you organize a bit in here. This kitchen is just so..." She paused, her eyes scanning my domain, clearly searching for a word that sounded diplomatic but still conveyed her disapproval. "Clutter." I watched, stunned into silence, as she began rearranging my spice rack. My spice rack, the one Arthur had built for me with his own 2 hands as an anniversary gift 15 years ago. He had measured each shelf with painstaking precision to fit perfectly in the narrow space beside our stove. Every jar had its place, a system I had used for decades, a small testament to the comfortable rhythm of our life together. Seeing Victoria's perfectly manicured hands moving my things, imposing her own cold order on my memories, felt like a profound violation. "I have managed just fine with my kitchen for 30 years, I said, the words coming out more sharply than I had intended. Victoria turned, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing her face before the mask of benign sympathy slid neatly back into place. "Oh, of course you have, Evelyn. I just thought, well, could help make things a little easier for you now." She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the empty chair at the head of the kitchen table, the chair where Arthur always used to sit. "Now that I am alone and apparently incapable..." The words slipped out before I could catch them, seasoned with a bitterness I did not recognize in myself. Her eyes widened slightly. "Evelyn, no one thinks you are incapable. Of course not. We are just concerned. We're concerned about you managing this big house all by yourself." "It is not that big," I countered, taking a slow sip of the tea I had brewed earlier. 2 bedrooms and a study, and the water heater that is always giving you trouble, and all the yard work," she added, her tone one of patient reasoning, as if explaining a simple concept to a difficult child. I said nothing. Arthur and I had discussed downsizing years ago, and had decided firmly against it. We loved our home. We loved our neighborhood, the familiar faces, the garden we had cultivated together from bare dirt into a riot of color every spring. The water heater worked perfectly fine with its regular maintenance, and I had a reliable service for the heavier yard work. "Daniel and I have been talking," Victoria continued, her voice softening into a gentle, persuasive murmur, "and we think it might be time to start considering some options. Options that would be more manageable for you." "Options?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Senior living communities," she said, the words flowing smoothly, clearly rehearsed. "There is a lovely one, the Willows, just 20 minutes from our house. You would have your own private apartment, but with dedicated staff available around the clock. They have meals provided, activities, social events. She was already pulling a sheaf of glossy brochures from her expensive leather purse. Had she brought them with her to the funeral too? Tucked away, ready for the first opportunity. The thought made me feel ill. I am not ready to leave my home, Victoria, I said. I kept my voice steady, a monumental effort when my hands wanted to tremble, to betray the rage and fear churning inside me. Oh, no one is saying you have to do anything right this minute, she backpedaled, sensing she had pushed too far too fast. But it is always good to start thinking about it. You know, planning ahead. Planning ahead. The funeral was barely over. The scent of the lilies from the service still seemed to cling to my clothes. I found something interesting yesterday, I said, deliberately changing the subject. I watched her face carefully. I was going through some of Arthur's papers, his desk calendar. He had several appointments with Mr. Alistair Finch in the weeks before he passed. Mr. Finch had been our lawyer for decades, a man Arthur trusted implicitly. Victoria's practiced smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Oh, yes. I suppose he would have. I wonder what they were discussing. Probably just updating his will, she added quickly, recovering her poise. Standard procedure. When someone is, she waved her hand vaguely, unwilling or unable to say the word dying. Probably, I agreed mildly. When is the reading scheduled for? Do you know? Daniel has been handling all of that. I think he said it's next week. She stood abruptly, a sudden flurry of motion. I should get going. I have a charity luncheon at noon. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table for a very long time, staring at the brochures she had left behind. They depicted smiling, silver-haired seniors playing golf, laughing over meals in elegant dining rooms, and attending art classes. None of it looked terrible. Exactly. It just was not my home. It was not my life. I thought again of Arthur's final, reassuring words. I have taken care of everything. Had he suspected this precise campaign was coming? Had he known his own son and his calculating daughter-in-law even better than I did? That afternoon, a new resolve took root in my heart. I called Arthur's doctor, Dr. Morgan, who had been both his physician and our friend for many years. Evelyn, how are you holding up? His voice was warm, filled with genuine concern that stood in stark contrast to Victoria's hollow performance. I am managing, I said. Actually, I am calling about something specific. In those last few weeks, did Arthur ever talk to you about his concerns for what would happen after he was gone? There was a careful pause on the other end of the line. He did. Yes. What did he say? I pressed, my heart beating a little faster. He asked me to keep an eye on you, Evelyn, Dr. Morgan said carefully, and to be available if you needed a medical opinion about anything. A medical opinion? About what? Another slight pause. About your capacity to live independently. He was concerned that there might be pressure for you to leave your home before it was medically necessary. My throat tightened. I see. And are you aware, doctor, that I am already experiencing such pressure? His tone sharpened immediately. Already? Evelyn, that seems entirely premature. You are in excellent health for a woman of 7. Your last physical showed no cognitive concerns whatsoever. Your mobility is good. From a medical standpoint, there is absolutely no reason you cannot continue living independently. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so strong it made me dizzy. Would you be willing to put that in writing for me? Absolutely. In fact, Arthur asked me to prepare such a letter. I have it ready. He thought you might need it. My Arthur. Even in his final pain-filled days, he had been thinking ahead. My protector to the very end. He had been anticipating the challenges I would face and quietly putting my defenses in place. Tears pricked at my eyes, but for the first time since his death, they were not tears of pure sorrow. They were tears of gratitude, and something else too. Resolve. I was not going to be pushed aside. The very next morning, I was sitting with my tea when I saw Victoria's car pull into my driveway again. This time she was not alone. Daniel was with her. They both wore expressions of determined cheerfulness that immediately put me on my guard. The battle for my home, for my independence, and for my dignity had truly begun. I did not sleep well that night, but for a different reason. The fear and shock had been replaced by a simmering, protective anger. My mind was not racing with worries, but with plans. I was formulating a strategy. Granddaughter had always told me that careful preparation was half the battle, and I would not let him down. When Daniel and Victoria arrived at my door just after 10, I was ready for them. I welcomed them with coffee already brewed, and a serene smile that I knew completely belied my inner turmoil. "Mom, we wanted to talk to you about some practical matters," Daniel began. He settled onto the sofa where his father used to sit every evening to read the paper. The sight of him there, so different from Arthur yet occupying his sacred space, sent a sharp ache through my heart. "Of course," I said, my voice even as I passed him a cup of coffee. "I have been thinking about practical matters too." Victoria perched on the edge of an armchair, her posture as perfect and rigid as a ballerina. "We have been researching some truly wonderful living communities," she said, her voice bright and enthusiastic, as she pulled yet another set of glossy brochures from her bag. It was as if our conversation yesterday had never happened. "This one even has a waiting list, so it is always a good idea to get on it early." I nodded, pretending to consider the shiny pictures of smiling seniors. "Before we talk about that," I said, setting my own cup down with a steady hand, "I would like to ask Sarah to join us." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. "Sarah? You mean Sarah Vance, the nurse who helped with Dad?" "Yes, that's right. She is just stopping by this morning to check in." I glanced at the grandfather clock in the hall. In fact, she should be here any minute now. As if I had summoned her on cue, the doorbell rang. Sarah Vance had been Arthur's home health nurse during his last few months. A woman in her 50s with kind, intelligent eyes and a calm, no-nonsense demeanor. She had become more than just a medical professional. She had become a friend. "Sorry I'm late, Evelyn," she said, stepping into the living room. "The traffic on the interstate was just terrible this morning." Victoria's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Evelyn, we were rather hoping to have a private family discussion." "Sarah was practically family during these last few months," I replied smoothly, gesturing for Sarah to take a seat beside me on the sofa. "And she has a great deal of professional experience that I think might be very helpful to our conversation." Sarah sat down, and her quiet, solid presence instantly bolstered my courage. She had been a silent witness to so much, including Victoria's thinly veiled impatience during Arthur's illness and her subtle reluctance to help with his personal care. "Daniel, Victoria," I began, my voice clear and firm, "I truly do appreciate your concern about my living situation. I know you mean well, but I have given it a great deal of thought, and I have made my decision. I will be staying in my home." Victoria's smile tightened at the edges. "Evelyn, we understand that emotionally, this house means a great deal to you, but practically speaking," I interrupted gently, refusing to let her finish, "I am perfectly capable of living here independently. In fact, I have spoken with Morgan, who completely agrees that there is no medical reason whatsoever for me to leave my home." Daniel frowned, looking genuinely confused. "You spoke with Dad's doctor about this. Arthur asked him to assess my capacity before he passed," I explained calmly. "He was very thorough. He has even a written statement to that effect." I reached for the envelope on the end table beside me and pulled out the letter Dr. Morgan had delivered yesterday. I passed it directly to Daniel. His eyes widened in surprise as he read the crisp official text. "This says you are in excellent health for your age," he said, looking up at me, a note of astonishment in his voice. Had he and Victoria already convinced themselves that I was frail and failing? "I also spoke with Mal Bright from the hospital's social services department," Sarah added, her professional tone adding weight to the statement. "She can easily set up a formal assessment to determine what, if any, supports Evelyn might need to stay in her home safely and comfortably for years to come." Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her chair, the brochures momentarily forgotten in her lap. "Well, that just seems premature. We are only exploring options here." "Actually," I said, looking directly at her, my gaze unwavering, "it seems like you have already decided that I should be moved to an assisted living facility. Send the old woman to a nursing home," were your exact words, I believe. The room went utterly and profoundly silent. Victoria's face went white, then flushed a deep, blotchy red. I do not know what you think you heard, but I heard you at the funeral, Victoria, I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. In the side room, you and Daniel were talking. I was there sitting in the corner. Daniel's face fell, his expression crumbling into one of dawning horror and shame. Mom, I'm so sorry. I do not blame you for thinking about the future, I continued, my voice softening slightly as I looked at my son, whose face was a mask of genuine remorse. But my future is not something to be decided for me. I am not ready to leave my home, and as we have just established, there is no legitimate medical reason that I should. Sarah has already been helping me develop a practical plan to age in place here, safely and with support. Sarah nodded, picking up the conversational thread seamlessly. It is really quite straightforward. Simple modifications like installing grab bars in the bathroom and shower, ensuring there is better lighting on the stairs, and setting Evelyn up with a medical alert system can address most potential safety concerns. Regular check-ins, either from family or a service, can handle the rest. The goal is to support independence, not remove it. Victoria, who had been struggling to regain her composure, finally found her voice. She stood up abruptly, her back rigid with indignation. This feels like an ambush. This is completely unfair. It is not meant to be an ambush, Victoria, I assured her, my voice still calm and measured. I am simply being practical, just as you suggested I should be. I am planning ahead. The doorbell rang again, its cheerful melodic chime cutting through the thick tension in the room. This time it was my 16-year-old granddaughter, Chloe, letting herself in with the key she had always had. "Hi, Grandma," she called out from the entry. She walked into the living room, then stopped short, her bright smile faltering as she took in the scene. She saw her parents, tense and unhappy. She saw me, sitting straight-backed on the sofa next to a professional-looking woman she vaguely recognized. The air was thick with unspoken arguments. "Oh, sorry. Am I interrupting something?" "Not at all, sweetheart," I said, managing a warm smile for her. Her presence was like a ray of unexpected sunshine. "We are just having a family discussion." Chloe, who was tall and thoughtful like her grandfather, glanced around the room, her perceptive eyes missing nothing. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her gaze settling on her father. We're discussing Grandma's living situation," Daniel explained, his voice strained and heavy. Chloe's brow furrowed in confusion. "What about your parents think I might be better off living in a senior living community?" I explained gently, wanting her to hear the words from me. "What? Why?" Chloe looked genuinely shocked, turning from me to her mother. The idea was clearly nonsensical to her. "Grandma is perfectly fine on her own. Are you serious? She literally taught me how to make lasagna from scratch last weekend. We were in the kitchen for 3 hours." Victoria's lips pressed into a thin, severe line. "Chloe, adult decisions are far more complicated than that. This does not concern you." "I am not a child, Mom," Chloe replied, her tone sharp with indignation. She looked at me, her expression softening. "And Grandma is not incapable just because she is 70 years old." I felt a sudden, overwhelming rush of affection for my granddaughter. She was so fiercely, wonderfully protective. Since Arthur's passing, she had made a point of coming over more frequently. Sometimes she would spread her homework out on the big kitchen table, just as Daniel used to do. Other times she would just sit with me in the living room, reading a book in comfortable, easy silence. Her presence was a quiet comfort, a reminder that my life was still full and connected. "Chloe, why don't you help me bring in some cookies and lemonade from the kitchen?" Sarah suggested kindly, clearly sensing that the adults needed a moment to recalibrate. She was giving them space to absorb the impact of Chloe's perspective. When they had left the room, Daniel sighed, a heavy, troubled sound. He ran a hand through his hair, looking utterly exhausted. "Mom, I just want what is best for you." "I know you do, Daniel," I said, reaching out to place my hand on his. "I have never doubted that. But what is best for me right now, and for the foreseeable future, is staying right here in my home, with the appropriate supports in place. Your father and I discussed this at length before he passed away. This was our decision. Together. Daniel looked torn, his gaze shifting from my face to Victoria, who stood silently by the fireplace, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The reading of the will is tomorrow, I reminded him gently. Let us just wait. Let's wait and see what Arthur wanted, before we make any more major decisions about this house, or about my living situation. Victoria finally moved, smoothing down the front of her skirt in a gesture of finality. We should go. I have a hair appointment I cannot miss. After they left, Sarah stayed for another cup of coffee. Well, she observed with a wry smile, that went about as well as could be expected. Thank you for coming, Sarah. I could not have done it without you, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. It helped, just having you here. A few minutes later, Chloe returned from seeing her parents out. She came and sat beside me on the sofa, her young face clouded with worry. Grandma, she said quietly, are they really trying to make you move out of your house? I sighed, the emotional toll of the morning finally settling over me. They are concerned, honey. In their own way. No, Chloe declared, her voice firm with the certainty of youth. They are being ridiculous and cruel. She looked me straight in the eyes. Do not worry, I will not let them push you around. Looking at her determined, loving face, I felt a flicker of real hope. The battle was far from over, but I was no longer fighting it by myself. The offices of Finch & Associates Legal looked exactly as they had 5 years ago, the last time Arthur and I had been there to update our wills. The same plush leather chairs, the same serene landscape paintings on the walls, even the same kind-faced receptionist with her perfectly coiffed graying hair. Mrs. Gable, it is good to see you again, she said, rising from her desk to greet me. Her smile was gentle and full of sympathy, though I truly wish it were under different circumstances. Thank you, Mrs. Gable, I replied, clutching the strap of my handbag a little tighter than necessary. My heart was pounding an unsteady rhythm against my ribs. Is everyone here already? Mr. and Miss Bradley just arrived a moment ago. Mr. Finch will be with you all shortly. I nodded and settled into one of the waiting room chairs, the expensive leather cool against my back. I had barely slept the night before, my mind a whirlwind of speculation about what Arthur might have arranged in those final secret meetings with his lawyer. Daniel and Victoria sat across from me. Daniel picked up a financial magazine from the coffee table, flipping through the pages without really seeing them, his brow furrowed in thought. Victoria, on the other hand, was a study in restless impatience, checking the delicate gold watch on her wrist every few minutes. How long is this going to take? She whispered to Daniel, her voice a sharp hiss. I have that charity board meeting at 2 o'clock. Daniel just shushed her quietly, shooting an apologetic glance in my direction. A moment later, Mr. Alistair Finch appeared in the doorway of the conference room. He was a dignified man in a perfectly tailored gray suit, his silver hair neatly combed. Evelyn, Daniel, Victoria, please come in. We followed him into his office and took our seats around a large polished conference table that reflected the muted light from the window. Mr. Finch settled himself at the head of the table. A thick, formal-looking folder opened before him. Before we begin, he said, his gaze resting on me with sincere kindness, I want to express my deepest condolences, Evelyn. Arthur was a good man, a very good man, and a dear friend. Thank you, Alistair, I murmured, touched by his words. Now, to business, he said, adjusting his glasses and looking down at the documents. Arthur's will is, for the most part, fairly straightforward. Evelyn, as his surviving spouse, you inherit the house at 725 Oakwood Drive outright, along with all of its contents. The joint bank accounts, of course, were already in both of your names and passed directly to you. There is also the life insurance policy, which names you as the sole beneficiary. Victoria shifted in her seat, leaning forward almost imperceptibly. And the investment account? She asked, her voice sharp with anticipation. Mr. Finch glanced at her over the rim of his glasses, his expression entirely neutral. I am getting to that, Mrs. Bradley. Arthur had a considerable retirement account, worth approximately $450,000. Upon his death, Evelyn is the primary beneficiary of those funds as well. Daniel nodded, looking unsurprised. This was all standard, all expected. There is, however, Mr. Finch continued, turning a page in the document, a codicil, a specific clause that Arthur added to the will just 3 months ago. It concerns the house. I felt a flutter of nervous anticipation in my stomach. This had to be it. This was what Arthur had been planning. Mr. Finch cleared his throat before reading directly from the page. The house at 725 Oakwood Drive is bequeathed to Evelyn Bradley with lifetime right of residence. Upon her death, or should she voluntarily choose to sell the property at any time, it will then pass to her son, Daniel Bradley. Victoria leaned forward even further, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. Her interest was sharply piqued. However, Mr. Finch said, placing a deliberate emphasis on the word that changed everything. There is a condition. If Evelyn is forced or pressured to leave her home against her wishes, or if she is moved from the residence without the documented, written recommendation of at least 2 independent medical professionals, stating that she requires a level of care that cannot reasonably be provided within the home, then the house will not pass to Daniel Bradley. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle in the quiet room. Instead, the property at 725 Oakwood Drive will be sold immediately, and the full proceeds of the sale will be donated to the Dementia Care and Research Initiative, in memory of Arthur's mother. The room went completely, profoundly silent. I stared at Miss Finch, hardly daring to believe what I had just heard. It was a shield, a legal fortress. Arthur had built a fortress around me, to protect me from the very thing Victoria had been planning. Daniel's face was a canvas of shock, which slowly morphed into confusion. I do not understand. Why would Dad think Mom would be forced to leave her home? Mr. Finch's expression remained carefully, professionally neutral. I cannot speak to your father's motivations, Daniel. I can only convey the legal provisions he so carefully established. All the color had drained from Victoria's face. She gripped the leather armrests of her chair, her knuckles turning white. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice tight and strained. "No one is forcing Evelyn to do anything. I am simply conveying the terms of the will," Miss Finch replied calmly. He then turned another page. "There are additional provisions as well. Arthur established a separate trust, specifically to pay for all future home maintenance, property taxes, and any in-home care services that Evelyn may require in the future." "He thought of everything," I whispered, the words catching in my throat as a wave of overwhelming love and gratitude washed over me. "There is more," Mr. Finch continued. "Arthur left a personal letter for each of you." He slid a thick, cream-colored envelope across the polished table to me. My name, Evelyn, was written on the front in Arthur's familiar, elegant handwriting. He then passed a second envelope to Daniel. "There is nothing for," Victoria asked, unable to hide the sharp note of indignation in her voice. "I am afraid not, Mrs. Bradley." Daniel stared at his own unopened envelope, making no move to touch it. He cleared his throat, his voice raspy. Can the condition about the house be contested?" Victoria shot him a sharp, warning look from across the table. Mr. Finch folded his hands neatly on top of the folder. "You can contest any will, Daniel. However, I must tell you that your father was of perfectly sound mind when he made these amendments. He underwent a complete cognitive assessment with a third-party specialist, specifically to prevent any such challenge. Additionally," he added, his gaze sweeping over them, "we videotaped the entire signing session, which is standard practice in our firm when such significant changes are made to an estate plan." "I see," Daniel said quietly, the fight visibly draining out of him. "If there are no further questions," Mr. Finch concluded, "I will have Mrs. Gable provide you with copies of all the relevant documents." Outside the lawyer's office, on the sun-drenched sidewalk, Victoria did not even attempt to hide her fury. The mask was gone completely. "This is absurd," she hissed, her voice low and venomous as she turned on Daniel. "Your father specifically and deliberately targeted me with that clause. He did this to punish me." "Victoria, not now," Daniel muttered, his face pale as he glanced nervously at me. "I need to get home," I said, my own voice quiet but firm. I had no desire to witness their argument, to be pulled into the vortex of their marital strife. "Chloe is coming over after school. We are going to start sorting through some of Arthur's clothes for donation." "I will drive you, Mom," Daniel offered immediately, looking for any escape. That is all right, Daniel. I drove myself. I had been driving for 50 years without a single accident, though Victoria had recently started making subtle suggestions that it might be time for me to reconsider my driving privileges as well. Every part of my independence had become a target. Mom, we need to talk about this, Daniel said, his expression troubled and deeply conflicted. Yes, we do, I agreed. But not today. Today, I need some time to process everything that we have learned. As I drove home, my hands were surprisingly steady on the steering wheel, a stark contrast to the emotional tempest churning within me. Arthur's foresight was a gift, a final act of profound love and protection that left me breathless. He had seen the storm coming and had built me a harbor. I thought about the thick, cream-colored envelope sitting in my purse. What final words had he left for me, and for me alone? Back in the quiet sanctuary of my house, I made a cup of chamomile tea and carried it upstairs to our bedroom. I sat in the armchair by the window, the one where Arthur used to read, and carefully, with trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. The letter was written on his personal stationery, his handwriting as clear and steady as ever. My darling Evelyn, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I fear you are facing the very challenges I worried about. I am so sorry, my love, that I am not there to stand beside you. In these last months, I have seen how Victoria looks at our house, how she talks about next steps when she thinks I am not listening, or am too sedated to understand. She sees assets, not memories. And I know our son, he is a good man, a kind man, but he is easily influenced by her ambition. He wants to keep the peace, and sometimes he forgets the cost of that peace. I have done what I can to protect you. The house is yours, Evelyn. It is yours for as long as you want it, as long as it brings you comfort. The money is there to maintain it, and to care for you, so that you never have to depend on their goodwill. Do not let them rush you. Do not let them make you doubt yourself. Do not let them push you into decisions that are not right for you. Remember what we always told each other after a hardship, what we would whisper in the dark when life felt overwhelming. We may bend, but we do not break. You are so much stronger than you know, Evelyn. I have seen that strength in you, every single day, for 45 years. It is a quiet strength, a gentle strength, but it is as powerful and enduring as the earth itself. Live your life, my love. Be happy. All my love, now and always. Arthur, tears flowed freely then, streaming down my cheeks as I clutched the precious letter to my heart. They were tears of sorrow for my profound loss, but also tears of gratitude for a love so deep it had reached beyond the grave itself, to keep me safe. He was still here. Even gone, he was fighting for me. I must have sat there for an hour, reading and rereading his words when the doorbell rang, startling me from my reverie. I composed myself, wiping my eyes and taking a deep breath before heading downstairs. It was Chloe, her school backpack slung over one shoulder. Her expression was unusually serious, her young face tight with concern. "Grandma," she said, stepping inside without her usual cheerful greeting. "We need to talk. Mom and Dad are having a huge fight about the." She met my eyes, her own filled with a worried wisdom far beyond her years. "Dad let something slip about a nursing home. What is really going on?" I ushered my granddaughter into the kitchen, my mind racing. How much of this ugliness should I expose her to? Chloe was perceptive, intelligent and mature for her age, but she was still just 16. This was a battle between adults, a tangled mess of grief, greed and broken trust. "Would you like some lemonade?" I asked, stalling for a moment to gather my thoughts as I opened the refrigerator. "Grandma," Chloe said, dropping her heavy backpack onto one of the kitchen chairs with a thud. She looked me straight in the eye, her expression unwavering. "Please do not treat me like a kid. I know something is wrong, and I want to know what it is." I sighed, recognizing the futility of trying to shield her. She deserved the truth. She had earned it with her loyalty. I poured us both tall glasses of lemonade and sat down across from her at the table. "Your mother," I began carefully, "thinks that I should move an assisted living facility." Chloe's eyes widened, her previous suspicion hardening into disbelief. "But why? You are perfectly fine here. You love this house." "She believes the house is too much for me to manage on my own now," I explained, keeping my voice even. That is ridiculous, Chloe scoffed immediately. This house is not even that big. We helped you clean out the gutters last fall. It took us like an hour. I gave her a small, sad smile. I think there are other considerations involved. Like what? She pressed. I hesitated, not wanting to speak ill of her mother, but there was no way around it. Financial ones, perhaps. A shadow of understanding crossed Chloe's face, and her expression darkened. The house, she said, her voice dropping. They want to sell it. Do they not? I just nodded slightly. It was all the confirmation she needed. Wow, she breathed, shaking her head in disgust. I cannot believe her. Then she looked up, a fierce light in her eyes. Your grandfather anticipated this might happen, did he not? That clause in the will, the one Mom is so furious about. Yes, I said. He wanted to make sure I would not be forced out. Good for Grandpa, Chloe said fiercely. Then her expression shifted, becoming worried again. But Mom will not give up easily. I have seen how she gets when she really wants something. That was an understatement. Victoria had always been relentlessly determined, a trait that had made her a highly successful real estate agent. She saw properties not as homes but as assets, and she pursued their acquisition and sale with a single-minded focus that could be both impressive and terrifying. I can handle your mother, I assured Chloe, with more confidence than I truly felt. Chloe took a long sip of her lemonade, her brow furrowed in deep thought. You know, she said finally, putting the glass down with a decisive click. I could move in with you. I nearly choked on my drink. What? Chloe, what are you talking about? Just hear me out, she insisted, leaning forward earnestly. I am going to Northwood University next year. It is only a 20-minute drive from here. I could live here with you instead of in the dorms. I would help with the house, with groceries, with anything you needed. And Mom could hardly argue that you are all alone then. Could she? I was deeply touched by her generous offer, by the simple, beautiful selflessness of it. But I shook my head. Chloe, that is the sweetest thing I have ever heard. But your first year of college is supposed to be about making new friends, having the full campus experience. I would still have all of that, she insisted, her voice full of passion. But I would also have free housing, and you would have company, and I would not have to eat dorm food. She grinned. It is practical. Practical. Victoria's favorite word, used here for a purpose she would never endorse. Before I could formulate a proper response, the front door opened, and Victoria's voice, sharp and strained, called out, Chloe, are you here? Chloe rolled her eyes in a silent, dramatic gesture of annoyance. In the kitchen, Mom. Victoria appeared in the doorway a moment later, her professional smile firmly in place, though I could see the tension etched in the tight lines around her eyes and mouth. There you are. I thought you were going to help Grandma sort through Grandpa's clothes. We were just about to start, Chloe said, her tone suddenly defensive. Victoria glanced between the two of us, her gaze lingering on our half-empty lemonade glasses, her expression immediately suspicious. What were you two discussing so intently? College plans, I said smoothly before Chloe could say anything more incriminating. Chloe was just telling me about the different programs at Northwood. Victoria nodded, though she did not look entirely convinced. Chloe, can you give your grandmother and me a few minutes alone? There is something we need to discuss. Chloe crossed her arms over her chest, not moving an inch. If it is about Grandma, then I think I should stay. Chloe, Victoria said, her voice sharpening into a command. This is an adult conversation. I am not a child, Mom. I placed a gentle hand on Chloe's arm, feeling the tension vibrating through her. It is all right, sweetheart. Why do not you go upstairs and start looking through the closet in the master bedroom? You can make a pile of things you think the shelter would appreciate. I will join you in just a little bit. Chloe hesitated, her loyalties torn. She shot her mother a pointed, challenging look before grudgingly picking up her backpack. Fine, she muttered, but I am not going far. She left, her footsteps heavy on the stairs, a clear signal that she would be listening to every word. When we were alone, Victoria sat down at the table across from me, her smile finally fading completely, leaving her expression hard and severe. Evelyn, we need to talk about what happened at the lawyer's office. I thought we had agreed to discuss it another day, I said, my voice even. This cannot wait, Victoria insisted, her hands clasped tightly on the table. That clause, Arthur added, it is manipulative and deeply unfair. I raised an eyebrow, meeting her gaze without flinching. Unfair? How so? It is clearly designed to prevent us from helping you make necessary, practical decisions about your future. Or perhaps, I countered gently, it was designed to prevent you from making those decisions for me. Victoria's eyes narrowed. The pretense of concern was gone, replaced by raw frustration. You think I am the villain here, do you? You think I am just some greedy monster who is after your house? I think you have very strong opinions about what should happen to me, and to this property, I said carefully, choosing my words with precision. Opinions that you expressed quite clearly at the funeral. A blotchy red flush crept up her neck. I was emotional that day. We all were. Grief makes people say things. Yes, I agreed. Grief often has a way of revealing our true thoughts, does it not? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if we were business partners negotiating a deal. Evelyn, be reasonable. This house is worth at least $450,000 in today's market. Are you serious? Think of what that money could do. It could do so much for Daniel's business, for Chloe's future. Instead, it is just sitting here, an underutilized asset. The clinical, detached way she spoke of my home, the place where I had raised my son and loved my husband for decades, sent a chill through me. This is my home, Victoria. It is not an investment property, and it could be someone else's home, she shot back. A young family who actually needs the space. Meanwhile, you could be in a beautiful brand new apartment with people your own age, with activities and fine dining options, all the things you think a woman of 70 should want, I finished for her quietly. She sighed, a sound of pure theatrical exasperation. I am just trying to be practical about this. So am I said, and the quiet confidence in my own voice surprised me. That is why I have already asked a home modification specialist to come and assess what changes might make aging in place here safer and more comfortable for me. Victoria's eyes widened in genuine shock. You what? Sarah Vance referred me to a very reputable company. They are coming next week to give me an estimate. Simple thing. Grab bars in the bathroom, perhaps better lighting in the stairwell, maybe even converting the downstairs study into a first-floor laundry room. I smiled faintly. Small, practical changes that can make a very big difference. That is just throwing good money after bad, Victoria protested, aghast. You are spending money to stay in a house that you will eventually have to leave anyway. According to whom, Victoria? I asked. Dr. Morgan says I am perfectly capable of living independently. For now, she said dismissively. But what about in 5 years? Or 10? If, and when I need additional help, I said, my voice steady. Arthur's trust will cover the cost of in-home care. Victoria stood up abruptly, beginning to pace the length of my small kitchen like a caged animal. You are being stubborn, Evelyn, and selfish. Daniel is only trying to do what is best for everyone, and that includes you, and you are making it completely impossible for him. Is it selfish to want to stay in my own home? I asked, my own voice rising to meet hers. Is it selfish to want to honor my husband's dying wishes for me? Arthur is not here anymore, Victoria snapped, whirling around to face me. The rest of us need to move on. That was it. The final straw. A flash of pure, hot anger, sharper and more intense than any emotion I had allowed myself to show since this whole ordeal began, surged through me. It has been 2 weeks, Victoria, I said, my voice shaking with the force of it as I slowly rose to my feet. 2 weeks. It has been 14 days since I buried my husband of 45 years, and you are already talking about moving forward, about selling the home we built together, the life we made. She actually had the grace to look momentarily abashed, to flinch at the raw pain in my voice. I did not mean, yes, you did, I said, cutting her off. You have made your priorities very clear from the beginning. So now, let me make mine just as clear. I stood tall, my gaze locked with hers. I am staying in this house. I am mentally and physically capable of doing so. My husband, Ensured I have the financial means to do so, and any further attempts from you to suggest otherwise, to undermine me or to treat me as if I am senile or invisible, will only serve to permanently damage your relationship with me, and potentially with your own daughter, who is not nearly as oblivious to your ambitions as you seem to think. Victoria stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. She was clearly not used to this kind of direct, forceful confrontation from her mild-mannered mother-in-law. For a brief, fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of genuine uncertainty in her eyes. Then the front door opened again, and Daniel called out, "Hello? Mom? Victoria?" Victoria took a step back, her expression shifting as she tried to compose her features just as Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway. One look at our faces, at my trembling anger and her shocked pallor, told him everything he needed to know. He had walked right into the middle of the war. "What is going on?" Daniel asked wearily, his gaze shifting between my face and his wife. Victoria's professional mask slid back into place with practiced ease, though it could not hide the tremor of fury still lingering in her eyes. "Your mother and I were just discussing some options." "What options?" Daniel asked, looking to me for an answer. But before either of us could speak, a clear young voice came from the stairway. Chloe stood there, her arms crossed, her expression one of cold fury. "They are arguing about whether Grandma should be forced into a nursing home, so you guys can sell her house." The kitchen fell into a deafening silence. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, his gaze shifting from Victoria to me, and then up to his daughter on the stairs. He looked like a man who had been struck. "That is not what we were," Victoria began, her voice high and defensive. But Chloe cut her off, her voice ringing with the clarity of truth. "Do not lie, Mom. I heard you. I heard you on the phone with that real estate agent yesterday afternoon when you thought I was out with my friend. You said the house could go on the market by summer if you just played your cards right." Daniel's face went completely pale. He turned slowly to his wife. "Victoria, is that true?" Victoria straightened her shoulders, lifting her chin in a gesture of defiance. "I was exploring all the potential options. That is what responsible adults do, Daniel. We plan for contingencies." "Behind my back?" he asked, his voice unnaturally quiet. "When we had already agreed, we promised that we would wait, that we would not pressure her." I had never seen my son look at his wife with such profound and undisguised disappointment. In that single, shattering moment, I realized just how much Victoria's relentless ambition had shaped the course of their marriage, perhaps without Daniel ever fully recognizing the toll it was taking. "I think," I said carefully, my voice cutting through the tense standoff, "that we all need to sit down and have an honest conversation, right now." I looked from my son's pained face to my daughter-in-law's defensive one. No more schemes, no more whispers behind closed doors, just the truth. Daniel nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping. "You are right, Mom." He pulled out a kitchen chair and sank into it, suddenly looking years older, utterly exhausted. "Chloe, please come down here." Chloe descended the stairs, her expression a mixture of youthful defiance and underlying anxiety. She came and took the seat right beside me, a small, silent gesture of allegiance that spoke volumes. Victoria remained standing for a moment longer, as if maintaining the higher ground was a victory in itself, before she finally, reluctantly, took the last remaining chair at the table. "I know you all think I am the villain here," Victoria began, looking directly at me, her voice tight with resentment. "But I am just being practical about a very difficult situation none of us asked for." "Mom?" Chloe interjected, her voice "There is being practical, and then there is being cruel." "Chloe," Daniel warned, his voice low. "No, Daniel, let her speak," I said, placing a calming hand on Chloe's arm. "Everyone deserves to have a voice in this conversation." Chloe sat up straighter, empowered. "Grandma is perfectly capable of living here. She is not sick. She is not confused. She does not need to be put in a home. You just want the money from selling this house." Victoria's face flushed, a deep, angry red. "That is not fair. Is it not?" Chloe challenged. Undeterred, "We see how you are about money, Mom. Always talking about investments, about upgrading the car, about moving up. but this is not just another property on a spreadsheet. This is Grandma's home. This is where Dad grew up. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father it made my heart ache. Victoria, we talked about this. We explicitly agreed we would not pressure Mom. And when exactly was I supposed to bring it up? Daniel, Victoria demanded, her voice rising. When she is 80, 90? After she falls down those stairs and breaks her hip. Stop it, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the rising tide of anger. I am sitting right here. Please, do not talk about me as if I am not in the room, or as if I am incapable of understanding my own life. Victoria had the grace to look embarrassed, dropping her gaze for a moment. I am sorry, Evelyn, but my concerns are valid. They are, I conceded, wanting to be fair. They are valid concerns, which is precisely why I am taking my own steps to make this house safer as I age. The modifications Sarah Vance recommended are sensible and proactive. I am getting a medical alert system, and yes, someday, I may need more assistance. But that day is not today. And when that day comes, there are options well beyond selling this house and moving me into a facility. Daniel looked at me, a newfound respect dawning in his eye. You have really thought all of this through, have you not? Of course I have, I said softly. Arthur and I discussed it all extensively when he first got sick. I folded my hands on the table, a simple gesture that felt like gathering my strength. Now I understand that you are disappointed about the house, Victoria. You saw it as an asset, a future inheritance. But it is my home, and Arthur wanted me to stay here for as long as I wished. He made that legally, unequivocally clear. That clause was manipulative, she muttered under her breath. It was protective, I corrected gently. And, as it turns out, it was necessary. The tension between us stretched, hot and brittle. Then, surprisingly, it was Daniel who broke it. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful shame. I am so sorry, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He was right. Dad was right. And I am sorry I did not see what was happening. He then turned to his wife, his gaze steady and clear, all traces of his earlier weakness gone. Victoria, this is not right. How would you feel if when you are 70, someone decided your home, your life choices, were no longer valid? If they discussed sending you away as if you were not even capable of having a say in your own life? That is different, Victoria protested weakly. I am not 70, and 70 is not 90, I reminded her gently. I could live here independently for another decade, or even more. Chloe, who had been watching the entire exchange with fierce intensity, spoke up then, her voice firm and clear. And I have been thinking, my offer to live here with Grandma during college is serious. It would be good for both of us. Daniel looked at his daughter, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. You really want to live here with Grandma instead of in the dorms? Why not? Chloe shrugged, a picture of teenage nonchalance that did not quite hide her determination. Northwood is close, the commute is easy, and I would save thousands of dollars in housing costs. Plus, she added, glancing at me with a soft smile, I would be here at night if Grandma ever needed anything. It just makes sense. I had not expected Chloe to bring up her offer again in front of her parents, but I was overwhelmed with love for her courage and her unwavering loyalty. Victoria looked between her daughter and me, clearly calculating this new unexpected development. I could almost see the gears turning in her head. If Chloe lived with me, the lonely old woman narrative would be impossible to push. She had lost. That could actually work, she admitted, her voice reluctant. She was recognizing her defeat, at least for now, for a few years at least. I am not asking for your permission, Mom, Chloe said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. I am telling you my plans. A small, proud smile touched Daniel's lips as he looked at his bold daughter. He turned back to me. It is not a bad idea, Mom, and you would not be alone in the house. Victoria nodded slowly, her posture finally slumping in surrender. Fine, if that is what everyone wants. What I want, I said, looking at each of them in turn, my gaze resting longest on my son and his wife, is for this family to heal. Arthur would hate more than anything to see us torn apart like this. Daniel reached across the table and took my hand, his grip warm and strong. He would, he said softly, and I am so sorry, Mom, so sorry that we added to your grief. Victoria did not apologize. I had not truly expected her to, but something in her rigid posture eased, a silent acknowledgement of the battle's end. We should go, she said, standing abruptly. Chloe has homework, and Evelyn probably needs to rest. Actually, I said, a real smile finally reaching my eyes. I was hoping Chloe could still help me with Arthur's clothes. It is time to start letting go of some things. Victoria hesitated, then gave a single curt nod. All right, Daniel and I will come back for her later. In the months that followed, our lives settled into a new rhythm. The changes came, but they were not the ones Victoria had planned. The home modifications were completed, small, sensible additions that made the house safer, without stripping it of its character. That fall, Chloe graduated from high school and moved into the second bedroom, filling the quiet, empty spaces with her youthful energy, her music, and her laughter. Daniel started coming by more often, sometimes alone. Without Victoria, we reconnected in a way we had not managed since he was a teenager, our conversations growing deeper and more honest. One cool evening, as we sat together on the porch swing, Arthur had hung decades ago. He confessed that his marriage was struggling. Dad's letter made me think about a lot of things, he admitted, his voice low as he stared out at the darkening lawn. About the kind of man I want to, the kind of example I want to set for Chloe. I simply squeezed his hand, offering the silent, unconditional support he needed. As for me, I discovered that 71 was not an end, but another unexpected beginning. I joined a water aerobics class at the local community center, reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with, and even started volunteering twice a week at the local library's literacy program, helping adults learn to read. The deep ache of losing Arthur never fully disappeared, but it softened, making space in my heart for new experiences and new joys. On the one-year anniversary of Arthur's death, I visited his grave alone. I placed a bouquet of fresh, bright yellow roses against the cool granite of the headstone. You were right, my love, I whispered to the quiet air, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the old oak tree nearby. I did not break, I bent, but I did not break. Walking back to my car, still driving my own car despite Victoria's lingering concerns, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. Arthur had given me many gifts in our 45 years together, but his final gift was perhaps the greatest. He had given me the space and the time to rediscover my own strength, to remember the woman I was beyond being someone's wife and someone's mother. I was Evelyn Bradley, 71 years old, still living in my own home, still making my own choices, and still finding joy in the quiet beauty of each day. That night, Chloe and I had dinner out on the patio, watching the first fireflies of the season begin to blink in the gathering twilight. Her first year of college had been a whirlwind of new friends and difficult classes, but she seemed happy and content with our arrangement. Do you ever regret turning down the dorms? I asked her. She shook her head, not a moment's hesitation. Never. This was the right thing to do for both of us. She smiled, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. Plus, it drives Mom absolutely crazy, which is always a bonus. I laughed then, a full, rich sound that filled the warm evening air. Arthur would have loved hearing it. The war was not over, not really. I knew Victoria was just regrouping, that she would likely try again someday, in some other way. But I was no longer afraid. I was prepared. I had found my voice, I had found my strength, and I had found my dignity. And I was not ever letting them go again. Evelyn's journey is a powerful reminder that true strength doesn't fade with age. It refines itself. Her story teaches us a profound lesson about dignity and the quiet courage it takes to stand firm when you are underestimated. At a moment of her deepest grief, her own family saw her not as a person, but as an obstacle to their inheritance. They planned her future without her consent, believing her to be a frail, forgettable old woman. But they were wrong. Evelyn's story shows us that resilience isn't always about shouting the loudest, but about strategic thinking, leveraging the love of true allies and honoring the legacy of those who believed in us. She teaches us that we all have the right to be the author of our own lives, and that it is never too late to reclaim your voice and fight for your independence. Her battle was not just for a house, but for her very identity and the respect she had earned over a lifetime. Stories like Evelyn's, full of heart and unwavering spirit, are what our channel is dedicated to sharing. If her journey of courage moved you, please show your appreciation by giving this video a like and subscribing to our channel so you never miss another inspiring tale. Every bit of your support helps our community grow and allows us to continue bringing these meaningful narratives to light, reminding us of the strength that lies within us all. We are always humbled to see how far these messages can travel, connecting people from all walks of life. To help us see how large our global family has become, please take a moment to comment below with the region or country you are watching from. Thank you for being here.